Good morning once again, everyone, and welcome to Bringing the Pieces Together, the analysis, recommendations, and next steps from the 2022 Arizona Child Care and Early Learning Landscape Report. I'm your host, John Ford from the San Francisco Federal Reserve Bank. We are so glad to be here with so many fantastic stakeholders from all across Arizona. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you also to our partner, LISC Phoenix, for bringing this important information to our entire group. In case anybody's wondering why the heck the Fed even cares about this work, let's make sure we understand that part of the equation. We've certainly been in the headlines for a lot of things, but one of the things that is very important to us is the future of childcare and more broadly, the future of work. And there's no way you can have that discussion without having a discussion about childcare, given the number of people who are in working families who need that resource in order to be part of a stable economy and a thriving workforce. So we are excited to be partners and supporters of this work, particularly of this report that is being released today, or that has been released and will be shared with you today. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us here today. Next slide, please. I want to bring on Terry Bonelli, who's our executive director at LISC Phoenix. Those of you who don't know her, you're missing out on a real treat, but we'll definitely be talking with Terry today. Also, Bevan Cerquez Parker from LISC National. Bevan, good morning. Glad to have you here today as well. As I mentioned, Terry is the executive director of LISC. She believes in comprehensive community development so much that she knows that it is her life's work. She's dedicated to ensuring residents of marginalized neighborhoods acquire the assets they desire for upward mobility, and childcare is certainly one of those, isn't it, Terry?
Sure is, John. You know, it's all, am I on?
And Bevan, thank you for joining us as well. She's a senior program officer at LISC National. She does amazing work for all 38 field offices and rural partners throughout the country. She is a rock star and superstar. It has been great to work with both of you over the last 18 to 24 months on this, among other folks that we're going to meet today. And Terry, I'm going to turn over to you to talk about who LISC is, what you do, and why you're involved in childcare.
All right, John, thanks. You know, it's always good to start the day with the San Francisco Federal Reserve. The convenings that you sponsor or put on, bringing practitioners and financial institutions together are really a must in these changing times. So LISC, Local Initiative Support Corporation. We're a nonprofit community development financial institution. Some folks know those as CDFIs. And we support local initiatives. If you say our name backwards, we're a corporation that supports local initiatives. We lend money to projects where the traditional banking sector doesn't really have the expertise to be successful. So think affordable housing, federally qualified healthcare centers, small businesses that serve neighborhoods that have been traditionally overlooked or even under-resourced. Over 30 years here in Phoenix, our success has come from our strategic imperative. We resource partners where there is, we call it wisdom at the margins. Working at the speed of trust is important to us, and it actually brings the best return on our investments in the community. Today's webinar is really the best example of what we do. We pool private and public funds to work with partners to support the people and places that we care about most. You can go to the next slide. The sectors that LISC Phoenix has supported over the past 30 years is expanding into the childcare arena. We've been involved and will continue to be instrumental statewide with affordable housing, both the expansion and the retention of units of affordable housing, which we all know is in crisis mode here in Arizona. And our Phoenix place-based work has centered around financial opportunity centers, support for small businesses that serve our transit neighborhoods actually, and healthy community activities like climate justice, emergency food programs, sports and recreation, and all this is done with our cross-sector partners. The past several years, we've been exploring where LISC might be able to fill a gap in the childcare sector. We're here today to talk to you about what we've learned and how we plan to begin these engagements. Our principal strategies for expanding access to opportunity to support the development, growth, and stability of our providers in the childcare sector is best explained by Bevan Parker-Churkas, who is our national expert around sourcing capital and growing our childcare investment portfolio. She brings the national experience and the expertise that we are using to help build our framework around best practices for this sector. Bevan, you want to tell them all about it?
Thanks, Terry. Good morning, everyone. I'm Bevan Parker-Churkas, Senior Program Officer with the LISC's National Childcare and Early Learning Team, where I have the distinct pleasure of not only working on national initiatives, thought leadership, and policy that drive equitable resourcing and systems change in the childcare sector, but I also get to work in close partnership with our LISC's 38 local offices as they develop strategies to support their local childcare ecosystems. We all know the childcare sector is nuanced and complex. It's been in a lot of trouble. We've seen a lot of headlines, and even prior to COVID, it had its challenges. But with challenges come real opportunities, and to drive real change, we know we need to lead with community. That's why I'm so excited to be at LISC, where our mission really is to lead with community and work with partners like Terry and team, where we can understand the systems players and available resources at the local level. And then in partnership, we really work with LISC Phoenix and in collaboration with local stakeholders to identify gaps in resources and work to fill those gaps. We often find ourselves sort of in the technical assistance and facility-based investment lane, primarily because facility investments are not really available in the childcare sector. We have a lot of, it's an under-resourced sector to begin with, but facilities does not come with a dedicated funding stream. And these are critical components to building out and addressing equitable access to quality childcare opportunities. Again, while we're facility focused, we are cognizant of the unique challenges that providers have, and we seek to build out supports that address long-term sustainability and growth in the sector. We bring over 20 years experience in supporting our local markets through grants, loans, and deep programmatic work. So we're bringing, as Terry mentioned, a lot of best practices we've learned in other areas around the country, with Rhode Island sort of being our flagship and longest running program, and then sort of layering in the local nuance and ensuring that we're working in collaboration and close partnership with our with folks on the ground to ensure that we're reaching those under-resourced and really supporting the long-term strategies for the system. We could not be more thrilled to be at the table with you all in Arizona today.
Thank you, Bevan. Thank you, Terry. And speaking of support and folks at the table, there's one key person that we need to bring right on right now, if we could, and that's Crystal Shannon. Crystal, I hope you can turn your camera on for us, please, and join us. I believe you're here, right?
I am here. I'm trying to turn the camera on, and I don't seem to have control of it.
Oh,
Is that something
goodness.
going on your side?
Let me see what I can do there. I apologize. I made you a co-host thinking that would help. Well, I apologize, Crystal. I'm not sure I can fix that, but I'm going to work on it right now. But let me just quickly introduce you and ask you to say a few words, because without your support, folks, Crystal is the principal of community stewardship at Vanguard. She has spent the past decade rewarding philanthropic investments in the Vanguard Strong Start for Kids program and overseeing governance for the Vanguard Group Foundation. She spent the bulk of her career at Vanguard, leading back office functions and large technology projects and business operation. And she is here to tell you today about Vanguard's involvement in Arizona and Vanguard's Strong Start for Kids program. So, Crystal?
Sure, thank you for that. Again, I'm Crystal Shannon, a principal at Vanguard and Community Stewardship, and we really started our commitment to early childhood. There we go. I think I have the video going now. We really started our commitment to early childhood back in 2016 and launched a program really focused on really trying to support our youngest learners, recognizing that the childcare sector was in crisis, has been in crisis and significantly underfunded. Vanguard Strong Start for Kids program invests in tomorrow by supporting the development, learning, and joy of young children today. The program provides funding to give children starting before birth through age 5 the opportunity to grow, thrive, and learn. With a focus on improving school readiness near our employment hubs in Philadelphia, Phoenix, Charlotte, Dallas, and several international locations. The program is a bit unique in that it's supported by both Vanguard corporate commitments, but also employee donations. As a matter of fact, we are in the throes of our annual workplace campaign right now and running a 5K later on today in support of Strong Start for Kids. So really incredibly proud about the commitment that Vanguard's making and importantly, the commitment of our employees to this work. We are also incredibly grateful to the support of LISC. We have supported the childcare sector in the greater Phoenix area since 2016, since the very beginning of our program, largely in direct services. And about a year ago, we took a step back because we really wanted to move more into the systems building realm, but really didn't have a good frame for who's working in this area, partners, funders that are interested in this work. So we turned to LISC through our relationship with Bevan, just to explore and understand the landscape so that when we made investments in the systems area, we could be effective by making sure that we're plugging into what the community itself has prioritized as the needs, and couldn't be more thrilled with how that work has turned out, and looking forward to engaging with other partners that are prioritizing this work. So I'll stop there, but again, just incredibly grateful for what you're about to hear in the report and just the hard work of the team.
Crystal, the feeling is mutual. Thank you so much, so much for your support, for your engagement, for your involvement. It's so important and couldn't be more grateful to you and to Vanguard for that. You know, we call this webinar Bringing the Pieces Together. That's the theme of the webinar. It's the theme of the work. It's the theme of the landscape report. It needs to be the theme of what happens moving forward as well. There are so many great stakeholders on this call today. There are so many people who care about childcare in Arizona, who are focused on what they can do to make a difference in childcare. We are grateful to all of you folks for that. And I want to bring on now Dr. Melanie Mitros. Melanie is the one who did all of this, if you will, made this report happen with Crystal's support.
Thank you very much.
We are so grateful to all of you for that. So thank you for that. Sorry, I think somebody kind of cut in. Apologize for that. Melanie has been a partner in crime of mine for a long time now. She's a fantastic person who engages philanthropy, nonprofits, for-profits, government, and communities to grow partnerships for change. If that sentence sounds like a lot, it is. She works relentlessly. MPW Consulting does fantastic work specializing in project management, relationship development, translational research like that we're going to see today, results-based facilitation, and much more. Melanie is a fantastic asset to Arizona. We are so privileged to have her here today. Melanie, good morning. If you would, help us bring the pieces together by running us through where the pieces are and what you found in the report.
Absolutely. Thank you, John, for the intro. Again, Melanie Mitros with MPW Consulting. Just a reminder for folks, if you do have questions or comments, please make sure to use the Q&A function. Since we're on a webinar format, you're not going to be able to unmute and ask questions. So please put those questions in the Q&A. So just a real high-level overview for you. This report details the findings of data collected from August 21st through July 22nd, and it includes data related to supply and demand of early care and education, key themes of challenges and opportunities from engaged stakeholders, parents, and childcare providers, and actionable recommendations to address the overarching goal of improving quality and access to the early learning system. I will say, if you have your smartphone or your iPad nearby, pull up the camera app and hold your camera up to the QR code, and then it should give you an option to open the link. This is the link to the LISC Phoenix childcare page. This childcare page has the full report, the executive summary, and also has a link to subscribe to the e-blast for continued communication from LISC Phoenix on their childcare work. So very important, you'll see this QR code throughout the webinar. So if you miss it right now, don't panic, you can come back to it. So this project really has been guided by LISC National's expertise, as you heard Bevan speak to, in early education financing and facilities. LISC Phoenix has completed this regional landscape analysis, and it is regional. I'll show you the regions here in just a few minutes. Although we did have conversations with stakeholders throughout the state of Arizona. This analysis was informed by existing data, key informant interviews, focus groups, and surveys that has all come together in the recommendations for this report. So really the ultimate goal of the project was to identify gaps and opportunities for LISC Phoenix and partners in places that they could invest in early care and education, also known as childcare. You'll see throughout the report and sometimes on slide, it's represented as ECE. That's kind of the short acronym, as we all like to have in everything for you there. If you do have questions about any of the additional methodology, we're happy to have that conversation. My contact information is on the last slide. I'd be happy to talk with folks about it or share additional resources or any of the materials that we use to collect this information. All right, so the geographic areas of interest that we focused on with this report not only applied and matched up with the First Things First Regional Council areas. So if these look familiar, that is why. East Maricopa, Phoenix South, Salt River, Pima Maricopa Indian Community, and Southeast Maricopa. These geographies were selected because they also overlap with LISC Phoenix's existing service areas and lined up well with Vanguard's service area in the Phoenix Metro as well. So a substantial amount of data was collected throughout this project. We will be covering just a very high level of the entire project during this presentation. I would strongly encourage you to visit the LISC Phoenix childcare page to download and read the full report. If you want a quick synopsis, there's also the executive summary there that you can review as well. So the great part that we heard over and over and found throughout our research and data review is that Arizona really has taken several key steps to help stabilize the early care and education ecosystem through federal pandemic funding. These investments have strengthened shared services, brought business training and support, and temporarily funded increases in revenue and wages. Yet the opportunity remains to leverage federal pandemic funding and identify sustainable methods to allocate state resources during fiscal year 22 and 23. Within each of the recommendations throughout, stakeholders have identified specific populations whose needs were not currently being adequately met. And these specific populations are no surprise to anyone on this webinar. We're talking about children who need non-traditional and variable hours, increased care for infants and toddlers, children living in rural areas, and for children with physical and developmental disabilities. Those were very high need areas that were not well identified. The main focus that we wanted to bring forward from the data review, there are tons of data points that are available. All of the data resources that we reviewed are also listed in the appendices of the report. But these three key data gaps that consistently have come up, and I've actually chuckled about it several times, that how many times these three came up. There needs to be a real-time mechanism to differentiate and monitor operating capacity and desired capacity compared to licensed capacity. We all know what the licensed capacity is, but operating capacity and desired capacity can often be very different. That how many kids can you actually function with? And then what is the business case model for the desired capacity? What is the number of kids that actually helps you be in the best position for your financial stability? So that's a great opportunity for us to really explore how do we look at all of those different moving pieces. The second one is that most data sources use a predictive modeling to determine demand from the total number of children and total number of working caregivers. What we do not have well identified in Arizona is waitlist data. So if we could figure out a way for Arizona to have waitlist data available that is disaggregated by race and income, this would be a better modeling case for demand rather than using the predictive modeling that we currently utilize. The third data piece is we really do not know the full impact COVID-19 has had on the demand for family. Again, this goes back to that waitlist data piece. How many families are utilizing family, friend, and neighbor care? How many families have chosen to opt out of the childcare system because of work, because of health, because of so many other things? So digging into those data pieces would be a wonderful way for Arizona to have a better picture. So the stakeholder interviews, this was probably my favorite part of the entire project, is getting to talk with over 25 folks, not only locally, but also nationally, from state agencies to city partners to nonprofit local partners, business partners, philanthropy, research groups, all kinds of folks. And really what we came down to are these 4 key themes that came forward. The first one is there is a clear need not being met to develop and stabilize and improve existing ECE spaces in Arizona, with a particular need in rural and tribal communities. Also, specific urban areas in South Phoenix, downtown Mesa, South Scottsdale, and South Tempe have a very specific need for affordable care that is also high quality. The second is that core areas of need identified by stakeholders included technical assistance for business development. Kudos to the Arizona Department of Economic Security in partnership with Southwest Human Development on already beginning that body of work. Financial assistance addressing deferred maintenance. This came up a lot, is around deferred maintenance needs for facilities. And then also accessing space, equipment, and facilities for infant and toddlers. So again, no surprise for anyone, infant and toddlers are a major need. The third is that as a state, Arizona has not made additional investments into the childcare sector as a state. We have seen a major influx of federal funding, but we have not seen a change in the way the state is allocating funding. Unfortunately, Arizona has disinvested in ECE, and it's created a competitive landscape where collaboration has been disincentivized. We do have great partners doing amazing work, First Things First, and continuing to improve quality, Arizona Early Childhood Alliance and Children's Action Alliance, providing critical advocacy components. So there's lots of great stakeholders, but we need a way to be able to bring those together. And then the last one is that there is an interest in a collaborative approach to address the stabilization, improvement, and expansion needs that have been informed by the community being served.
Melanie, I
Yeah,
know I'm not supposed to interrupt you, but I just got to say, first of all, you packed so much into those slides.
yeah.
And I'm wondering if we can just go back, if you don't mind. I think we have enough time to do so. If you
Sure.
can go back 2 slides, please. This data gaps thing is there's so much in those 3 data gaps.
There.
And I know that nobody has actually put questions out there, but they have to be rolling through their minds right now. Particularly when you talk about the demand for and utilization of family, friend, and neighbor care, particularly during COVID. One of the, we have to qualify this as anecdotal, but it seems like it's more than that, which is folks saying, especially during COVID, it didn't make sense for both parents to work because of the massive uncertainty of whether a daycare would be open or whether one of their kids sniffles and they're out for 7 days minimum, or school or whatever it might be. So I'm wondering if, I know that we're trying to do this at a high level, but I've got to imagine people have a lot of questions about these data gaps, and in particular that one. Is there more you can say to that in terms of what you heard from folks?
So with this one, actually, one of our other great partners, Candelen, will be releasing a report around the demand and what parents want from particularly the view of family, friend, and neighbor care. That report should be coming out later this year in 2022. And the other piece with the data is, I believe there were 8 unique reports, including this one, that were all being released between September and the end of 2022. All of those reports are outlined in this full report. So I will say there's a lot more information that's going to be coming out. And that is a unique opportunity for Arizona to be able to bring all of those data pieces together, tell a comprehensive story, and then be able to put a plan for action for where all of those line up.
Okay, 2 more things real quick, and I'm sorry, I know you got when you talk about real-time mechanism to differentiate operating capacity, desired capacity, and licensed capacity, you were very diplomatic in how you said that. And I don't mean to put too much of a spotlight on this, but is desired capacity to be greater or lower based on the ability to run a childcare facility or a childcare center is in comparison to licensed capacity, for example, or operating capacity? Can you give a little bit more flavor there, just really quickly?
I think that really ends up being dependent on the childcare provider. It depends on what their business model is. And this really, again, is one of those opportunities, and working with Southwest Human Development and Candelen. And I know United Way of Tucson and Southern Arizona is going to be supporting some of this. But the state has really done a great job of making an initial investment and starting to move business practices forward and really recognizing childcare providers as a business. And in that recognition, helping them put together business models that help them figure out what should be their desired capacity to have them at the best financial situation for them.
Okay, last quick question. Is real-time waitlist data, it's not modeled, is that a unicorn? Or is it
No, but I'm going to hold that answer till my recommendations. So everyone wait with bated breath for that. Or if you've read the report, you know what it is.
Okay.
All right, I'll keep us moving forward, but please, folks, if you do have questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat, or sorry, in the Q&A. All right, so on to the focus groups. So we conducted 5 focus groups throughout the region. We did 4 with parents, 1 in Spanish only. We also did a focus group with childcare professionals from First Things First, from DHS, from DES, so Department of Health Services, and the Department of Economic Security, and other stakeholders across these focus groups. What we universally heard was across Arizona, everyone views the investment in early care and education as critical to address the gap between demand and supply, and to stabilize and improve existing providers and caregivers. This was absolutely universal. There's a lot more detail around the focus groups and what parents were saying, what the professionals and stakeholders were saying as well. Again, I would strongly encourage you to read the full report to get all of those additional components. But parents were across the board with what they were looking for. Some parents really preferred a home-based environment. Some parents preferred a center-based environment. But what all parents brought forward is that they wanted a pleasant experience for their children. Something that was interesting to me, but not interesting to anyone in the childcare sector, is that smell really mattered. The smell of the facilities was really important, that it was clean and fresh, but not overly sanitized, not kind of gross. But if you think about how that plays in with all of these other facility conversations, there's a lot of things that can factor into those smells, thinking about airflow, the AC systems, windows and lighting and all of those kind of fun things that can factor in. So it was really great to hear from parents about those different components and that the visual aesthetics and the way that they interact with a facility, home or center-based, was really important. Another thing that also came forward quite a bit with parents is how important safety and security were. No surprise, we all absolutely adore our children and want to protect them even when they're not in our direct care. So video systems, self-locking doors, keypads outside, exterior lighting of facilities that are open when it's dark. So all of those kinds of things came forward from parents' feedback as well. Now, the last piece we did was a provider survey. We did a provider survey that went out to all of the licensed centers and homes, as well as we had a partner share the same survey in English and Spanish with home-based unlicensed childcare providers throughout Arizona. So of note, just a reminder, the state of Arizona, it is legal to provide care for children in your home, up to 4 children for pay without having to be licensed. But if you're not licensed or certified, then you don't have the ability to connect in for any benefits or payments directly through the state system. So just a note for folks. So when we asked providers what would be the most helpful to you, over 3/4 of provider respondents indicated improving the health and safety of my home or center, improving the quality of my care, and to help them become a better early child care facility. The areas of greatest need that were identified were expansion, and then quality improvement, and then health and safety. Facility project technical assistance was also a need, and the last one was business coaching. And I will note again, the Southwest Human Development business coaching work had begun early on during the data collection for this project. So that could have influenced that being a little bit of a smaller number. So, but know that that was really still also very important for folks. And the number one thing that came out, outdoor environment, which if you're in Arizona, and it doesn't matter if you're in Northern Arizona or Southern Arizona, the outdoor environment is very important. You're facing sun, you're sometimes facing wind, you're facing snow in Northern Arizona, so there's a lot of opportunity. All right, so now on to some recommendations. I know everyone's excited to hear these. So our facility specific strategy. Oh, looks like we skipped a slide. There we go, system level recommendations. So based on the learnings, the approach to address early care and education in Arizona must include universal outreach to all providers to share resources such as shared services through the Arizona Toolkit, and a targeted approach to proactively engage facilities with health and safety concerns in high need areas. COVID did not cause Arizona's fractured system. Low state reimbursement rates that have remained largely unchanged for almost 19 years have contributed. High staff turnover, where almost 20% live in poverty, resulting in almost half of Arizonans living in a childcare desert. And that data is really based on 2019. So we don't have up to date on where we have those childcare deserts, but we know that that has not improved. 2 years into the COVID pandemic, parents still face tough decisions related to early care and education. Many centers do not have available spots with wait lists up to a year. The cost to provide quality care have continued to rise. And parents express an increased need for part-time, flexible drop-in and extended hour care, and have expressed discrimination and extremely limited options based on language and care for children with physical and developmental disabilities. So these system level recommendations include dedicated and sustainable state and federal funding that must be designated for early care and education. While Arizona is in the process of investing $1.2 billion of federal funding, Arizona has not allocated additional state funding towards subsidies since the Great Recession ended in June 2019. This funding could provide permanent increases in provider rates to meet the cost of quality, ensure stabilization and expansion activities occur in geographic areas to meet the needs of families, and provide incentives for new and existing providers to enroll in Arizona's quality rating and improvement system through First Things First, Quality First. The second recommendation is accessible data would be valuable for parents searching for care, for providers considering growing their programs, and for the state to invest in expansion efforts driven by geographic demand. We have some great first steps happening with the Child Care Resource and Referral Network, incorporating licensing and inspection data from the Department of Health Services, certification from the Department of Economic Security, financial assistance from the Department of Economic Security, and quality ratings from First Things First. However, you know, that magic unicorn you were talking about, John, it exists in the Texas Child Care Availability Portal. It is an excellent example for Arizona to consider for a more comprehensive data integration that does show real-time availability and waitlist. You can even search for childcare along your public transit route from home to work. So the unicorn exists, and it's an opportunity for Arizona to really look at that investment. Next recommendation is, we know childcare providers have a difficult and extremely important job. They are caring for the youngest in Arizona. Workforce recruitment, support, and retention efforts should continue to be invested in. This will require state and federal investments to reduce the gap between the cost of care and subsidy rates, to increase reimbursement rates. Families cannot afford to pay more, and childcare providers cannot afford to charge less and retain quality staff. The second to last recommendation, this is an evolving landscape. It's constantly changing. We do have some great mapping and data resources like the Bipartisan Policy Center's maps, like Read on Arizona's maps. Like, we've got some great resources already. What we need to do is these need to be monitored constantly to understand the evolving demand for early care and education, as well as the current supply. As policy, strategy, and funding changes, this unique issue, as well as the overall quality of the early care and education supply in Arizona, should be revisited regularly to best serve Arizona families. And as a state, Arizona should explore a collective impact type model. Doesn't have to be collective impact, but something in that lane, with a neutral backbone organization to model its common agenda, establish shared measurement, and align mutually reinforcing activities. This is going to be really important as the state continues to move forward through this federal funding. So we're here talking about lists. So of course, you're going to get to hear some facility-specific strategies that we're bringing forward. So the first strategy is to establish a pooled fund of federal, state, private, and philanthropic dollars. This should sound familiar for folks. This is what LISC does. So we're really excited to partner with them on this. Arizona really does need to develop this collaborative approach, because currently we do not have a fund that is available. And I know I saw a question in there, why does Rhode Island have so much investment? Because they've been able to figure out developing this collaborative fund to invest in facilities. The second strategy is Arizona has an opportunity in 2022 to invest current federal funds and develop a future with pooled funds. So working with community providers and stakeholders to create an outreach plan, develop an infrastructure assessment for existing operators to see where they are and see what they need to make changes to, as well as to improve the quality of existing operators by funding light renovations and facility improvements, cultivate a network of facility and infrastructure champions, So all of these pieces are going to have to come together around that potential pooled fund. The third strategy is for providers. Providers self-reported their physical space needs throughout this data collection and this report, which likely resulted in them underreporting their actual facility needs. So we need to support early care and education providers to understand their facility needs, and ideally Arizona investing in trained personnel to conduct facility assessments to support those providers. And this last strategy is to ensure that early care and education providers have the technology, training, and technical assistance to support greater sophistication in business management. And this is a key piece of what's already happening, and we're hopeful that this investment will continue for their business support. So the last piece, recommendations for next steps. Immediately work with Arizona state agencies to leverage the current federal Child Care and Development Fund investments to address infrastructure stabilization and expansion. This really is a unique opportunity right now. The second, we got to figure out this data piece. So really needing to have a data movement going forward where providers serving children receiving subsidies who potentially have health and safety licensing violations are able to prioritize infrastructure investments. But the flip side of that data is also that demand and supply conversation. What is the availability and what are those wait lists? And the third is to design and implement a family-friendly integrated data platform. And like I said, there is a model that you can take a look at. Again, feel free to scan the QR code with your camera app and you can download the full report. Thanks, John.
Melanie, thank you. Folks, it's awesome. Okay, admittedly, 48 pages, but it's worth it. There's pictures, there's graphs, there's charts. It's not all words.
And there's an 8-page executive summary
yes,
that digs into the meat and potatoes of the recommendations. And then when you're going, how did they get to this? Then go to the full report.
that's right. That's exactly right. And this executive summary has pictures and charts too. So it's not that bad. Y'all need to read it. Please check it out. Use your QR code if you can. If not, I think I posted earlier in the webinar the actual old school, if old school is possible with the internet. The old school web link is in the chat. Melanie, childcare is a business, and because childcare is a business, and as much as it is a service, if you will, we want to bring on next David Longoria. David, if you could turn your camera on, that'd be great. David is here today to talk a little bit about building capacity from the ground up, and specifically from that business perspective. David has more than 20 years of public sector experience. Folks, he's worked at the national level, the state level, the county level, the city level. Just great work that he has done throughout this area of Pima County and the state. David, welcome this morning. Thank you for joining us. If you could, please talk to us about the SBA Community Navigator Program and some other work that you could share with us that's upcoming.
Thanks so much, John, and thanks to all of those for making the time to attend this morning. Like John said, the main focus of my portion of this morning's presentation will be on two important programs which are currently active and have helped to lay the groundwork for our next steps in future grant programming for early childhood education providers. Next slide, please. The first program I'd like to highlight is the Small Business Administration's Community Navigator Pilot. This is a nationally based effort of which LISC is a top tier recipient or hub, and the local Phoenix office is one in 7 different markets around the country selected to help carry it out. Under this 2-year program, which was specifically created as part of the American Rescue Plan passed last year, we are partnering with 4 local community-based organizations to provide one-to-one technical assistance and support to entrepreneurs of color, BIPOC-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, and veteran-owned businesses which have negatively been affected by the recent pandemic. These local program spokes, as we refer to them, are Rail CDC, based in the East Valley, concentrating in East Tempe and downtown Mesa, Trellis, working largely along the McDowell Road Miracle Mile corridor here in Midtown Phoenix. The Asian Chamber of Commerce, which has widespread reach among its membership across the valley, and Southwest Human Development, which in a unique role under this program is focusing on working with regional early childhood education business owners and operators. The idea behind the Community Navigators is not only to provide services which help lift up entrepreneurs of color and women-owned businesses, as well as the often marginalized communities that they serve, and to narrow the access to capital gap among business owners who have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic, but also to help develop the overall entrepreneurial ecosystem into a more supportive structure, one which promotes equity in businesses' desire to grow and build greater wealth, and better equalizes financial opportunity for emerging majority-owned businesses, which can also have lasting positive generational effects, such as the emergence of anti-displacement outcomes for vulnerable populations. To date, under the Community Navigators pilot program, LISC Phoenix's partner spokes have touched almost 300 local businesses, helped make $3 million in grants and loans possible, and provided almost 700 hours of counseling across a variety of different topics. And we're not even a year into this effort yet. Next slide, please. The next program I'd like to mention was made possible through a corporate grant to LISC from Procter & Gamble this year. And this is called Empowering BIPOC Entrepreneurs and an Equitable Childcare System. This national effort aims to support the early childcare industry in order to meet the needs of BIPOC women in the workforce and as childcare business owners and operators. It combines capacity building, business development assistance, and access to capital to these providers and small businesses. Phoenix is one of 3 markets around the country implementing this initial program, and our local collaborator on this is Candelin, which is participating as a community-based partner organization to provide quality support and assistance with coaching and training content, focusing on business and financial stabilization and growth for home and center-based early childcare centers here in Phoenix. In addition to Candelin's outreach and support through consultation and instruction and other preparation in obtaining urgently needed resources to the highest priority childcare providers under this program, they will also be assessing the effects of such intervention by utilizing the Business Administration Scale, or BAS, to measure the quality of business practices in the BIPOC-owned childcare programs. BAS is a valid tool for home-based childcare businesses, focusing on business practices such as fiscal management, record keeping, and marketing and community relations. Under this framework, a business coach will conduct an initial on-site visit and complete an assessment to set goals with the owner based on the results. The consultation and coaching will be delivered virtually and centered and tracked around those goals. At the end of the work over a multi-month period, the business coach will complete a second in-person visit and do a post-BAS assessment. The change in the BAS scores will demonstrate the effectiveness of the consultation and increasing quality of business practices. Finally, this program is also utilized as a strategy to build a roadmap or a pipeline for future prospective grantees on which to expand support locally and statewide for Brown and BIPOC women through an equitable childcare and early learning lens. Childcare is a critical issue of racial, gender, and economic equality, as the ripple effects of the pandemic have obviously shown us. Women of color make up the majority of childcare operators and staff, and are most likely to have their careers disrupted when their families can't find quality care within their means. LISC is particularly committed to supporting women in emerging majority-owned businesses and to supporting women in the workforce, and this project demonstrates this commitment, combining a variety of services to these women entrepreneurs, supporting them and the Brown, Black, and BIPOC mothers they serve. These 2 projects have helped set the stage for the next phase of funding as we work to mobilize and deploy a variety of partners in order to provide the essential components necessary to address critical and urgent needs for childcare providers, while also fostering growth for small businesses, stabilizing the communities they serve, and strengthening the greater entrepreneurial ecosystem for women, BIPOC, and emerging majority business owners. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, John, for the next presentation.
Thank you, sir. Very exciting. David, you have, you're helping us bring the pieces together, as it were. Thank you very much for sharing these opportunities with us. So we've now had, just in the space of this webinar, we've touched base with funding from Vanguard from a philanthropic perspective, funding from the federal government from a small business perspective, and funding from a private employer that is all focused on what we can do to help support childcare. We truly are in this webinar bringing the pieces together. And speaking of those pieces, I think it's a really important thing to do now is to introduce you to some folks from DES, in particular, Michelle, if you would turn your camera on. Michelle Gennaro, excuse me. Michelle, how are you? She is the Deputy Assistant Director of the Department of Economic Security Division of Childcare. 20 years of experience in advancing education, health, and social services to impact change at the community and state level. She pretty much, sorry, I hate to oversell it, but she pretty much does it all at DES when it comes to childcare and childcare providers. It's just a laundry list of amazing work. So Michelle, welcome. Thank you for being here today. She is also a veteran, by the way, of child health and also First Things First. So Michelle, we really appreciate you joining us today. Please, if you could, take us through what's going on with the Division of Childcare.
Great. Thanks so much, John. And it's wonderful to be with everyone and on this webinar today to talk about this critical issue for our state. So I just wanted to start up with sharing a few key data points. So next slide. One thing that we always want to keep in mind, right, is the parent labor force participation. We have over 600,000 Arizona families in the labor force with children birth to 5. And we know 22% of those are in poverty. And the minimum wage worker is spending about 44% of their earnings. So points that Melanie already touched on, but wanted to reinforce and share with this slide. And we do know infant care is the most difficult to find and often reaches beyond $10,000 a year. Next slide. And so when we think about families in the labor force, the DES subsidy, the child care subsidy that families receive, pre-pandemic, we were serving over 33,000 children. In June of 2022, this year, we were serving 23,600. So you can clearly see how the pandemic had an impact on families and children. And our goal is to work towards bringing that number back up to the pre-pandemic levels. And a critical population that we serve is the children from the child welfare system. And so when we talk about the needs of these children, the importance of childcare is so critically important. And we hear too often about the disruptions that happen, whether it's in foster home or kinship care due to childcare not meeting the needs of these children. Next slide. We also know that childcare is a mixed service delivery system. So it's in your home, it's family, friend, and neighbor care, it's family child care, it's child care centers. And there are a variety of programs that provide childcare options for families throughout the year. And so it's critical to keep that in mind, that it's a mixed service delivery system with a mixed funding system, but that presents itself the challenges that families face, particularly in our childcare deserts. Next slide. And so that's why it's also critical to keep in mind that childcare gap. The 15 counties in Arizona, there's the childcare gap in each of them. And you can see particularly in the rural communities, how high that gap is. And we know of various stories, so as Melanie talks about the demand of the difficulty of finding childcare and the implications of that for families, and then the hard decisions that they need to make. Next slide. So we know there was a national investment in child care. $1.3 billion came into Arizona, and the Department of Economic Security through the Child Care Division is committed to working with partners throughout the state and looking at how these dollars are spent to support the childcare industry and our families. We have the first set of 88 million that came through the CARES Act that was utilized to address the immediate needs of the pandemic. And then the continued funds through the Stabilization Act and the current funding resources are used to really look at a childcare recovery plan. Next slide. And that recovery plan, we have over 30 strategies that we are implementing with partnerships throughout the state, focused in 4 key areas. It's about expanding access to care, investing in the quality of care, accelerating the educational support and early childhood literacy, and stabilizing the childcare network. And the link at the bottom of the slide, you can also go to our website, keeps you updated about the childcare recovery plan here in Arizona. Next slide. And so in these 4 areas, I'm just going to talk briefly about the first 3 and then really focus in on stabilizing the childcare network. Expanding access to care. So in the beginning, we were focused around essential workers and making sure that there were supports going to the childcare providers. Ongoing, we have suspended the childcare waitlist, which is critical. So particularly for all of you that are on this call, if you're working with families, we encourage you to have them apply for childcare subsidy. We do not have a wait list. The other aspect is we have really focused on the links. I just read John's chat there. We've focused on rates. As Melanie stated, rates have really been low for Arizona with a lack of investment. And so we've been able to move all of the rates to the 75th percentile of the 2018 market rate survey. And we've also been able to move effective November 1st to a daily rate. So this is really a game changer for childcare to see this investment and to receive the reimbursement at these levels. We're also partnering with First Things First to expand Quality First scholarships. That is also beginning November 1st. We appreciate everyone's patience as we work through these contracts to make this happen. But these are really important aspects of being able to expand access to care. We also want to make sure we're focusing on the quality of the early care and education system. And so again, through some partnerships through First Things First, looking at the expansion of Quality First, as well as the expansion of early childhood mental health consultation. The business coaching has also been critical. The partnership with the Department of Health Services to modernize licensing, as well as reduce the licensing costs on providers. These are all critical aspects to improving the system, both for providers to provide the care that they want and know that children need, and to make sure that children have access to the care that they deserve. We've also had a focus around accelerating educational support and early childhood literacy. That includes partnerships with the higher institutes of education to provide scholarships for individuals who are going to school full time and receiving various degrees. So this has also been a game changer to support higher education for individuals by recognizing they're often part of families with young children. We also have a partnership with the Department of Education and Read On Arizona, both to look at high quality early learning programs and an investment in supporting literacy coaching and social emotional learning, key elements for our young children, as well as supporting families through the expansion of the Dolly Parton Imagination Library and getting books in the hands of children and their families. So a critical partnership that is going to have lasting impact for Arizona. And then this last piece, and we can go to the next slide, around stabilizing childcare. This is through our Child Care Stabilization Grant that goes through June of 2023. We reached out and through partnerships to all of licensed childcare providers and certified providers in Arizona to make sure that they knew about the Child Care Stabilization Grant. And this provides direct funds that they receive each month that can support them in various expenses, from personnel costs to rent and mortgage and utilities, facility maintenance or improvements, goods and services, mental health supports for their staff, addressing the issues from the pandemic. And then in July of this year, there was an enhancement to this monthly grant specifically geared towards the workforce. So looking at hiring and employing childcare staff, that could be sign-on bonuses, that could be retention bonuses, that could be an increase in pay, that could look at benefits. These are critical elements, as we know, to running a business and being able to provide for the staff. The staff are what make or break the childcare business. And so the turnover has a significant impact on the business and our children. And so these stabilization grants are really important to the providers. And you can see on the next slide, just very briefly, what the amounts are from our non-certified relative providers. We can get a monthly amount of $900. And if they have the workforce, that's an additional $250. To our certified family child care providers, the group homes, and then the various centers based on their license capacity. So a licensed center with 100 or more children can receive upwards of a month $30,100. So you can imagine the impact that this will have on the childcare industry over the next year, and a real collaborative effort to make sure we're reaching out to all of the childcare providers so that they knew about these stabilization grants. And then we're really excited, next slide, to talk about the infrastructure building and our partnership with LISC and entering into a recent contract of $30 million to support supply building. We understand the critical importance of looking at the need of childcare in the childcare deserts, and so looking at new sites. We understand the importance of facility improvements, as well as supporting advancements in quality by looking at materials and supplies and renovations. And so we have a lot of partnerships in the work, particularly with First Things First, on various projects throughout the state to really support this work around infrastructure building and understanding the needs of our childcare system. And so we're really excited to partner with LISC, who has the expertise and collective partnerships throughout the state and nationally to support this work and to truly utilize these federal dollars in a way that will be a game changer, hopefully, for the childcare industry, and it's a significant impact on our families. And so again, we are so appreciative of the partnerships and the collaboration, excited about the supply building work that's going to take place. And again, please stay connected to the work that we're doing using this link on our website. So thank you.
Michelle, thank you. That was a lot. That was a ton. So much so you got a little choked up there. Thank you so much for this. Really appreciate it. Folks, in addition to the link we posted in order to stay in touch with what LISC is up to, make sure you grab that link that just came off the screen, and we'll put it in the chat in just a minute. And as Michelle said, we are all incredibly excited about the partnership with LISC. And so Terry, I want to bring you back up, and you're already here. So thank you for joining us again. Take us through what's coming up, what's happening, what the timeline is, and how things are going to proceed from here.
Sure. So thanks, Michelle, for sneaking in the announcement about this new investment in Arizona's future by DES. So $30 million of their child care stabilization grants are going to be administered by LISC Phoenix. through grant making and technical assistance activities. And in layman's terms, technical assistance activities is holding your hand. Just like this woman is doing in the picture with the kids, teaching them something. So we're here to really be working side by side with the providers to help them access this $30 million by September 2023. And that is an urgent deployment timeline. And it's also, urgent for the need among families and communities to support this rebuilding of our fragile, fragmented childcare industry. We're activating partnerships and leveraging data for strategic collaboration across the state of Arizona. So LISC Phoenix and our partners will increase the capacity and quality of existing childcare providers, and will also increase the access to childcare through supporting currently not licensed or certified childcare providers and or providers to enter the childcare ecosystem. Can you go to the next slide? So what does that mean? Who is eligible for accessing these funds? And it really is those licensed or certified providers, tribal and military providers, as well as unregulated childcare providers that are interested in getting certified. New childcare providers interested in the Arizona Department of Health Safety licensure and certification, and those contracting with Arizona DES. The grants that we will be administering in the next 11 months will include new childcare supply building activities, like increasing the capacity of your existing facility with minor renovations. So anything contained within the facility footprint, making quality improvements to increase your star rating, addressing health and safety violations that Melanie talked about in her findings when talking to providers, helping to fix the deferred maintenance needs that are out there, and coordinating the planning for facility expansion for new and existing childcare providers. So if you're a childcare provider, we don't expect that you would understand how to take on a project to expand your facility, but we're here to help you with this grant to make those what we call pre-development decisions and plans. Priority consideration will focus on childcare providers who serve DES eligible families in childcare deserts that Michelle was talking about. These are areas where childcare is extremely limited, or there actually isn't any childcare available to families. Additionally, priority considerations for building the supply of care that addresses non-standard hours of care, infant and toddler care, childcare in the underserved areas, and childcare that meets the needs of children with disabilities. These are all things that were lifted up in our interviews, and also that Michelle described when she was talking about the needs for childcare facilities. The next slide. This is what we believe our timeline will look like for the next year. So while early care and education is new to LISC Phoenix, understanding data and engaging with the community, developing a plan and implementing that plan are not new to us at all. LISC Phoenix is positioned with a unique opportunity to become a core partner in stabilizing and growing the early care and education infrastructure here in the state. 4 years ago, LISC was invited into this space through conversations with First Things First. They wanted to explore what it would take to conduct a facility needs assessment, and leadership turnover throughout the state, and also COVID, displaced these conversations that we were having until the opportunity for childcare and early learning partnership with Vanguard Strong Start for Kids program began in 2021, just a year ago. LISC is really prepared to take on this role with the support of our national team and the emerging investments that are becoming more evident as we explore this sector. As an intermediary, we're positioned to seek investments and opportunities to raise public and private awareness and dollars to thoughtfully participate with the early care and education sector. Okay, so we know this is a time crunch. We've got 11 months. But you know what? This is an opportunity that we cannot miss. The LISC team is working diligently to have supports and technical assistance available for childcare providers throughout the state of Arizona. We're building our team to support you. The application will be a rolling process that will be open in November and will continue throughout the grant period. Throughout October, November, we'll be training partners statewide to support the application technical assistance for new and current childcare providers. And in early November, we're going to host another webinar for new and current providers that's going to be live and recorded, and it will help you through the application process, which we are very cognizant of not putting barriers in the process and making it as clear and concise as possible. Okay, so if you haven't already, open your camera app on your phone and scan the QR code that's here on the slide. It's going to take you to the Phoenix Child Care page where you can subscribe to what we call eBlast Communications. We're going to keep you updated on any progress and any information that you need to know so that you can access these one-time grant dollars to support your childcare facility. John, what's the next steps?
Oh yeah, I can figure those out all by myself. Not. You know, the whole point of this discussion, and Melanie, if you could join us back on screen as well. The whole point of this discussion and meeting, and Terry, don't go away, I think we still need you as well, is to bring the pieces together. And I think what we've done over the course of this meeting is bring a bunch of pieces to the forefront. There are many, many pieces amongst the people who are attending this webinar as well. We have a fabulous group of stakeholders in this state. Many of them have been mentioned, some of them have not yet, but they're all out there. Great groups of people who've been working on these things for a long time. As Melanie said, the system was broken long before we had COVID. COVID just really exacerbated things and pointed out some of the work that needs to be done. And I think the landscape report has done a good job of capturing a bunch of that. So, you know, a lot of work to be done. Some of it very urgent, like what Terry just shared with us. We've got players who are stepping in, who are bringing new sources of funding. Just in this meeting, we've talked about state funding, federal funding. We've talked about philanthropic funding. We've talked about private employer funding. We've talked about the issues. We've talked about the resources. So I guess what I want to remind folks of is what we've been through, and then talk a little bit more about where we're going to go. You have Bevan sitting here, who is our, one of our great national resources. She's seen it all in the 38 different places that she's worked. I know folks had a lot of questions like, what the hell? What's up with Rhode Island? Well, Bevan can answer that question. There are a lot of things that are going on. Melanie and her travels for the landscape report, she found the unicorn, the great data unicorn in Texas. There are other resources out there that we can pull into this discussion. Here at the Fed, all of our Western states are working on the future of childcare and the future of work. There are resources that the Fed can bring to the table, including the opportunity for us to do convening if that's something that folks feel would be helpful, because we want to bring these pieces together. This is a personally held belief as much as it is a professional one. We do have a lot of the pieces that we need to solve these problems. None of us will solve them individually, and none of us will solve them easily. For those who have been through that whole technical versus adaptive challenge training or that philosophy, I think that's one of the things we have to keep in mind. This is not a identify the problem and then identify the solution. This is identify the situation, bring stakeholders together, and figure out how we can all contribute to adapting the things that we have, the resources that we have, the opportunities that we have, the skill sets that we have, that each one of our organizations brings to the table in order to bring a new systems change. That's where we're headed. That's where we want to go. And to that point, Bevan, I'm going to put you on the spot first and say, looking at it from a national perspective, then zooming into Arizona, where do you think we're heading? Where are the key points that we need to think about moving forward?
Thanks, John. I mean, I'm gonna repeat a lot of what you just said, but that's okay. It doesn't hurt to say it more than once. I think, if nothing else, COVID has made us come to terms with the critical role that early childhood education plays in the lives of children, families, employees, employers, and our local communities. So while we're emerging and looking towards hopefully a more normalized way of life, there's challenges that remain in the system, and that's in Arizona, that's across the country. And I think it's important to name those. A lot of places are still struggling with understanding and grappling with real-time data, right? We really need to we had a sort of glimpse of what it looked like before COVID, and we knew throughout COVID, things changed. Family preferences changed. Centers, home-based childcare were opening and closing at really weird rates. And so hopefully we're a little more stabilized given the resources we've been able to put into the sector. But it's really important still to understand where there's supply and demand, understand where those family preferences now are, given that we've gone through so much, and people want to be able and mindful of what the future holds. So, thinking about what home-based childcare looks like within the context of local communities, it's really a really important piece of the puzzle. So I think also identifying where those access points need to be and ensuring that those are quality points, and that families can navigate systems and resources easily to identify where there is availability of care. So that speaks to a lot of, what Melanie discussed in terms of childcare availability portals, and we have some best practices in other states we can look at for that work. There's the workforce issue. And again, while we remain sort of in the facility lane, we know that there is, this is inextricably linked to workforce. We can't expand our supply of childcare if we don't have professionals and teachers to be in those classrooms. And so that is a really critical piece of the puzzle that we need to sort out. Additionally, we've benefited from some real substantial investment from the federal government into the sector over the last few years. At this point, however, without new resources being identified, we really face a federal funding cliff. And that's a real challenge, not just for Arizona, but for everyone. And so that's where advocates and partnership come into play, where we can really be sounding the alarm on what this has done for us and what it means to continue to resource the sector appropriately. But not to be all Debbie Downer. With challenges comes real opportunity, right? So we have an opportunity today to invest in our childcare infrastructure, but we want to be mindful of doing so in a way that leads to a sustainable and well-resourced sector. And we can't do that alone. I think that's really where the partnership and collaboration comes into play. It's so important that we work together to ensure that we're developing the right set of interventions that really address the long-term health and stability of the Arizona childcare system. And hopefully, John, that's where the Fed can play along with us and help support that effort.
We certainly hope so. If there's something that could be done in terms of bringing folks together to collaborate, creating that table, setting that table, that is something that the Fed would be humbled and privileged to do. So we would love to help do that. That said, there are so many incredible stakeholders on this call right now. Unfortunately, it's a webinar, so you can't talk, but we know you're there. We know about the incredible work that you do. I think it's important, Melanie's report mentioned the notion of a backbone organization. I personally haven't seen backbone organizations be incredibly successful in Arizona, but it doesn't really matter what we call it. What we need is better collaboration, right? There is an opportunity for that amongst all the rock stars that are attending this meeting right now, all the people who've been doing this work for decades. It would be really great to do that. And if that is something that the Fed can help to set the table for, we're happy to do it. If there are folks on this call right now who say, oh, you know what, when it comes to technical assistance, that's me, then please raise your hand. Or when it comes to workforce development, we know how to do that, please raise your hand. I think that there are enough people who may or may not know about those resources who do need to know about them. It would be great for folks to self-identify and help lead those tables. In those cases where they're not, and where there are not those things, and we need to create a table, we're happy to do that. So, just real quickly, I know we're running tight on time, and I apologize for that. But on that technical assistance side of things, Melanie, I think there's some discussion to be had prior to us leaving this particular meeting regarding technical assistance and potential contractors.
Yes, thanks for that, John. So with this DES childcare facility grants opportunity, if you or someone you know would be interested or has experience in providing technical assistance or training, or potential contractors and or vendors that work with childcare, please send me an email. I'm going to put our contact information up on the slide. It's melanie@mpwconsulting.org to receive a request for qualifications email later this week. LISC Phoenix is actively working on starting to collect those potential vendors and contractors and consultants to help support this initiative rolling out super quickly. And Eric, don't worry, I will be quickly sharing some information with you and the Arizona Toolkit to help us get this information out. But again, the request for qualifications really is going to be focused around consultants, vendors, and contractors. So if you know of any of those folks who might be interested in helping us throughout the next 9 to 10 months on this project, please send me an email at melanie@mpwconsulting.org.
And Terry, really quickly, if you could speak to how LISC Phoenix is expanding its working resources, if you will, towards this, towards the work on childcare. Can you speak to that real quick?
Sure. Well, we did hire a familiar name for those folks, probably from First Things First or around the sector. Cynthia Meldy is joining our team at the end of the month. And I feel like I went to Vegas and hit the jackpot on this one. We're so excited for her to be a part of the team and leading this effort. For those of you that know Cynthia, you know that she is down to earth and gets things done. And we're excited that she's, again, going to be able to work with every one of you as providers to help you get access to these dollars. And we will be building out the team with even more folks as we, start processing applications soon, right? November.
No pressure, Cynthia, not at all. But we all know her and we all know she's up to it. So thank you, Terry, for that. Here's what we're going to do, because we're running really close on time and there's nothing worse than a webinar going too long. So you've gotten a couple of links during the course of this webinar, one for the LISC childcare page, early childhood education page. And that page has the ability to sign up for eBlast there. You've gotten a link to the DES page. That page has, I believe, a sign up on it so that you can get information communicated to you there. Let's keep it going. In the next couple of days after this webinar, you're going to get a follow-up email from this webinar with actionable links on how you can stay connected and how we can start to answer this question of whether or not we need to be building new tables or whether folks want to step up as stakeholders currently and head up those tables. We know what the report says needs to happen or could happen in order to strengthen our early childhood education landscape. Let's get to the work, shall we? We're really, really excited for everything that has been offered up today. There's a whole bunch of people who are still off camera who presented today who are integral to this work. Thank you so much to them as well. We really appreciate everybody for being here today. And here's to the next, however long it takes us to make a meaningful difference in the early childhood education landscape. Thank you all very, very much. Have a great day. We'll look forward to connecting with you again very soon.